Zillion Trillion, Katrina.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back after last time. If you haven't, please go and listen to the first episode. I think it's important in order to be able to listen to this one. And Katrina has been kind enough to come back. I'm so happy that you're back. And let's dive in.
I talk a lot, so thanks for having me back.
No, I talk a lot too, so it's a thing. I hope you guys are ready for round two. The last time we ended in, you were basically sent back home from the hospital, and then you were just sent home to deal with your grief.
Yes.
And that's kind of where...
Yeah. I remember after I gave birth, 2 hours later, maybe, I don't know, they said I could go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thrilled to be going home. I mean, as thrilled as you can be, but more I just really want to go home and finally grieve.
Yeah.
And begin what I knew would be a very long process, but I had kind of been holding my breath for about a month, waiting for everything to happen. And in that, I remember always feeling like the most important thing was my daughter's, how she felt. Because I personally believe that they can pick up your energy.
100%.
Yeah. So for me, it was very much while my husband had started grieving and was in bed and, crying and processing, I was very everything's okay. It's going to be okay. I love you. So it wasn't until I got home that I was now I can finally cry because she doesn't have to feel it.
Yeah.
So I went home and started, I guess, what that process was. I'm not really sure. I just remember I went to bed. I know my parents were there. I don't really know if I ate. I don't really know if I don't remember. It's a blur, but I think it was a Friday or a Thursday. I think it was a Friday. And I don't know if I felt sick. Like I said,
just exhausted also.
I was so exhausted. I had just delivered. I was bleeding still. I'd gotten a little sick while I was in hospital. I hadn't, I was on drugs for how many days, God knows, but yes. So I was exhausted. I was depressed.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how I was meant to physically feel. All I know is on the Monday, I finally was I want to have a shower.
Mm-hmm.
I just hadn't felt obviously, when you're depressed, maybe showering is harder, but it was also just the idea that I didn't want to do anything for the first time without her. But I finally was okay, I have to have a shower, and I wanted to wash my hair. And I just remember lifting my arms in the shower and feeling just completely depleted of energy. So I remember sitting on the shower floor, and eventually I got out and I put myself in a towel and I lay down in bed. And I remember I turned to my right, and I've never had a problem sleeping. I think I said that earlier. And I just started shaking uncontrollably. And I thought that was weird. I didn't really know.
Are you alone?
I was alone.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I turned to the left-hand side and I kept shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't control my body. I was just trembling. And it was
aggressive.
Yeah, it was aggressive. It was almost is this hypothermia? It was the weirdest feeling. And then I thought, wait, do I have a temperature? And I asked my husband to take my temperature and it was high. I think, I don't know, it was over 100.
Yeah. And then at what point were you do I go to the hospital?
Yeah, I didn't know. So I called the hospital that I had been discharged from, and they basically were you've been discharged. So, I mean, if you're worried...
They didn't see you.
No, they said you were discharged by our records a couple of days ago, and you looked good. So, everything's probably okay. I guess postpartum things happen. You monitor yourself. If you're worried, you're welcome to go to an emergency room, but do what you feel is right. They didn't say go and they didn't say not go. I felt kind of dismissed, to be honest. And I didn't have any aftercare because my OB had ghosted me in the process. So it's not
who do you even call?
Yeah.
Who's your doctor?
I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to go to the hospital near me because they're the ones that wouldn't work with me when everything happened.
Yeah.
So this hospital was over an hour drive away again. We've just been in hospital for a whole lot of days. I've never gone to an ER room in my life.
Yeah.
Never. It's just not how I grew up. I just didn't do that. I'm not sure. And I also am always scared of being dramatic. Even when I was sick and I had, a cold, I remember my mom being you're fine. Not, she's great, but that's just, I came from a place of being in sick kind of meant you were in trouble. You did it.
Yeah.
Which is
it was seen as a weakness.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. It was just maybe
a problem with women also constantly just feeling that you're being dramatic.
Yeah.
And like, and belittling.
Am I sick enough to be here? Like,
yeah, like, am I taking too much space?
Yes.
Because I don't think that I would ever think that, right? Like, if you
No.
think about it, my husband literally gets a little cold and he will go to the ER most likely.
I saw a TikTok yesterday. It was the best. And it was a woman literally lying in the hospital bed after she'd given birth.
Yeah.
And her husband with a video, and he's like, now she knows what it's like when I have the flu. It's pretty good though, right?
It's insane. My husband literally was saying that he was feeling the contractions when I was posted. And I'm like, are you insane? He's like, yeah, my leg is falling asleep. Do you feel this? And I'm like, are we okay?
Don't they get, yeah. God bless.
God bless them. I think it's amazing because at least they're able to feel empowered enough to go.
Yeah, feel comfortable in their flus.
But it is crazy to think because I'm sure I would have felt the same way also because I'm like Latin and I'm loud and everyone always constantly tells me that I'm dramatic, that I have to like keep asking
and I'm going to be honest, I often think about this so I felt sick.
Yeah.
And I felt like something was dramatically wrong. And it scared me because I didn't know if something was dramatically wrong, but I felt sick enough to think I need to go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's crazy is what I think about often is had I come home with a child that was alive, I don't know if I would have gone to the hospital. And because of that, I don't know if I'd be alive today. And because, what woman wants to leave their newborn child? Like you wouldn't, you definitely put that first. So, I think that I do think about that. And it's kind of crazy because like in a weird way, I guess maybe she saved me by not being there, which is also insane. So yes, it was my Hollywood story as it was the night of the Emmys.
Totally.
And I work in entertainment and I live very far on the east side and the hospital I wanted to go was on the west side of LA. And I knew that my boss, who I'm very close to, and he lived very close to me, was driving that way for a ceremony or like an event.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually called him. As I said, my mother was in town and she can't drive. And I talked to my husband and I just decided like I wanted my mom with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's also COVID. So
oh yeah, it was COVID. I couldn't. Yeah, they actually said I couldn't take anyone into the ER room.
Yeah.
So I was like, she can wait there. Like,
yeah.
Zach can be at home. We have 2 dogs. We hadn't been. That's his name. And we hadn't been at home. With the dogs for days. Whatever. This is what I did.
No, it was a logistical thing. Also, I mean, there's also life kicks in the way, right? It's not like the world stops because something happens. Sadly,
it doesn't. So I called my boss and I remember he answered and I said to him, "Can you drop me at the hospital with my mum? I don't want to die in an Uber. I can't. I don't. It's not funny. I smile because that's how we deal with things.
Yeah.
If you're not laughing, you're crying. But I think that's just how I felt. It was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next hour, so I don't want to die in an Uber because I just felt weak. I had a temperature. I was shaking. I couldn't eat. I think I was in pain. I can't explain it. I was bleeding. Like, there's just so many things going on. So he, without question, picked me up and my mom. And I just remember being in the car, like, I couldn't speak. I wanted to present. It's very me and it's very probably a lot of women. I was like trying to present as normal. Mm-hmm. God forbid I die in your car. That's the worst thing for you. Like, it's the same way we always have fears when we go on planes that something could happen and how I might react in that. Like, anyway, he drove me to the hospital. We got out. There was all sorts of stuff at the counter. Like I said, it was COVID. My mom had to wait outside. I like snuck her through the side. There were people that said they'd been waiting for 12 hours. It was like, I still didn't know if anything was wrong with me. I still felt like I was kind of gaslighting myself. Like maybe I'm not that sick. Maybe I'm being too dramatic. Like all of that stuff.
You've gone through like all this mental stuff. So I think at that point I would even question myself. Like, am I doing like is it me? Is it my mental thing or is it like a physical thing?
Honestly, that's probably what they questioned too. Yeah. And it was like mental gymnastics. And I went at first because I said I checked out a few days ago. They let me go to like some other desk, but that desk called the OB ward, and the OB ward of labor and delivery were like, no, she needs to go to ER. We already told her this. So like then I was kicked back to that. Anyway, they triaged me pretty quickly, and like the good news and the bad news, I guess the good news is because of how they did it, I was prioritized to get into the ER quicker, but like I guess they took my blood and iron panel quickly with my finger, and it was like I was really low. So they were like, you're definitely anemic. Yeah. You probably lost too much blood. We're probably going to need to get you back there quickly for a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
And like that sounds pretty dramatic, but I was like, great, let's do it. I remember very clearly. It's so weird. Your brain just knows stuff. Like your subconscious, what you absorb your whole life, you might not even know a word, but you know, and then it comes up. And I always say maybe it's from like reading, like reading's the best way to learn, and like language just grows from that. But I remember being in this hospital, this little waiting room in the ER, and I heard the words in my brain, she's septic. My blood went up a bit. Like, it wasn't like an emergency. Like, I was in the emergency room, but there was no like alarm.
Yeah.
So then my mum waited a few hours, and then she tag teamed out. Like I said, I could only have one person. So then my husband came and took that shift. He waited with me. They moved me into a room with like 20 other beds, and they were just like, we're monitoring you. It was around midnight at that point, and they said like to my husband, like, you should go home. Like, there's nothing to see here. We're in a room. All these people are sleeping. Come back in the morning. We can probably discharge her. We're just monitoring, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no feeling that like anything was truly wrong. And that's kind of also why I felt like a little, you know, gaslit by the experience, because I also felt incredibly weak and was like, well, I don't know what it is, but like,
also, why are you not checking? Why are you not doing other tests to see what else could possibly be?
I think there's a lot of backlog in these rooms. I do remember I finally got a ultrasound, and they looked in my uterus, and it was like a horrible experience for me, because just being like, you know, I don't know how many women see what it is to have an empty uterus, of an empty sac after you deliver, when it's still there. Like, my body hadn't realized yet. And just seeing that and explaining to the ultrasound person that's like never going to see me again, like, oh, I had a stillbirth 2 days ago, and like it was, you know, it was a really, really, really intense experience. Went back to the room with the 20 other people, and just like slowly feeling weaker out of it, but again, overcompensating, being like extra to the nurses, because I want them to think that like I'm not dramatic, and like we can be best friends. Like, I'm really cool. I'm cooler than the people that are hard to deal with here. Like, I'm always trying to make you like me. And then they kept kind of running around and testing me and my blood pressure, and saying things like, can you uncross your legs? You're not taking your blood pressure right. Please uncross your legs. And me being like, what's the problem? Like,
yeah, relax.
Anyway, eventually the nurse that I really liked said to me, hey, I don't want to scare you, but about 20 people are coming down here, and they're going to be looking at you. And I just want to prepare you for that, okay? Do you feel okay? And I remember saying, okay. And they came down, just 20, you know, I don't know, a lot of people around my bed. They turned the lights on in the whole room. And they asked me questions like, do you have a DNR, which is, do you have a do not resuscitate? Have you ever had a heart attack? Like, questions I've never been asked before.
But no one is explaining it.
No,
they're just asking you.
They're getting through questions that I guess they need to get through. And then they said to me, can we do a bedside cardio, which I guess is an exam to just check like your heart. They did that, and then they said to me, we want to take you up to the ICU. Like, do we have permission to do that? Like, yes, of course you do. I didn't really know what was going on, but I said yes. And then the nurse said to me, text your husband and tell him you're going to the ICU. So I did. I mean, I really didn't think anything of it. I mean,
well, no one even
sorry.
explained anything.
I thought a lot of it, but I was just in survival, right?
Yeah,
like, I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that like something was wrong, and maybe there was a validation that something was wrong. That they were moving me.
Relief to some point, that like, just because you've been saying that you're sick, and everyone is kind of gaslighting you the entire time, and like, just
I don't know if there was a sense of relief. I think that I knew something was wrong, and it was a sense of survival.
Okay.
And like, I'm going into the place where they will care for me in some way. On the way, they did do a CAT scan, and by then I remember like I was on the stretcher, and they lifted me from the stretcher to the CAT scan, because I at that point I couldn't really move anymore. And I remember they asked me to lift my hands up, and I couldn't do it. They felt like dead weights. Like, I was in so much pain at that point all over my body, and I was still shaking. They took me out, and I remember I was like lying naked in a room. They put like a lot of tubes on me. It was really intense. I was alive, but I was aware that I might not be. And I remember a nurse to my right, or a doctor, looking at something and saying to me very clearly, your youth will save you, but I need you to fight for your life. But I remember that the way I did do EMDR for that moment as well, because it really, for obvious reasons, traumatized me. And I do remember this feeling of like, well, my daughter died, so maybe it makes sense if I do. Like,
what
just
is EMDR?
EMDR is a form of therapy that is effective. It was started, there's that famous book, The Body Keeps Score,
Okay.
and they talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
But EMDR is this idea that sometimes in traumas, the way our brain processes trauma is different. It's different to talk therapy, where you can like kind of talk about it and work it out, or cognitive therapy where there's action. EMDR is this idea that your trauma gets stuck in part of your brain and your brain can't process it.
Okay.
And the way to process it is through, there's certain methods. It's either with rapid eye movement or tapping. If you've heard of that stuff, or these vibrating panels of colors. And it's the idea that you visualize the experience. For me, it was very visual based. So it worked well for me because I am a visual person. And you visualize the experience. You don't talk to the therapist about it. You don't talk about it beforehand. You, in it, might talk about certain things. But really, it's about changing the narrative in your brain so you can experience it, but it doesn't have the same trauma as before. So for me, I remember sitting and looking at this the panel next to me where she said I had to fight for my life, and thinking something like before, the narrative was I'm going to die and this is my fault. And what changed in EMDR for me is the narrative became I am a survivor and I will fight. So you go from this thing that like gets you stuck to this experience that's different. So woke up the next morning and it was just really loud noises, things all around me. And I found out, I guess at some point during that day, that I had and was kind of still in septic shock. So that's the level above sepsis when your body goes into shock. And what that means is it's actually, I think it's got a 40% mortality rate, which is very high.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of this then. I know it since Googling afterwards and becoming obsessed, but 40% mortality rate and an even higher rate for, losing limbs and extremities.
Well, because the blood is not pumping.
Yeah. So septic shock basically means that there's a bacterial infection in your blood stream. So different to a bacterial infection in like sinus or something. It's in your bloodstream, and your body's reaction to that, it's an autoimmune response where your blood coagulates, right? And because of that, the flow to your heart is very slow, and it attacks your organs one by one. And that's how the body shuts down and you die.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of managing it. It's a time thing, because I think a lot of people die from septic shock because they don't get it in time.
Yeah.
It's very quick. It needs an interference, so you will die. And what happens to a lot of people is when the body goes into shock and you're at hospital, you might do an ECMO, and an ECMO shuts down like your blood. It takes the blood out, it cleans it, but you lose limbs. Things aren't getting blood. Organs are severely damaged, and it's really serious. Or none of that, and you can die. And for me, I'm really lucky. I mean, I'm lucky.
It's also insane to me because they know the number is very high because they work at hospitals. So these people know, like, it's not like us that are Googling things after, right? And you were there for at least 12 hours and they didn't even think to check for this. No. And then I'm saying this because my mom also had a septic shock and she almost died when I was born as well. So it does happen very, very often. So it's crazy to me that even in an American hospital in California, like the richest state or one of the richest states, like, I mean, we could be the third economy worldwide if we were our own country, like, no, but they wouldn't even think to check for that.
No, and I think that there's things like there's different signs, and I'm not mad at the hospital because they got to me in time, but I'm mad at the system that had me check out of hospital 2 hours or however, a very short amount of time after giving birth. Yeah. Because
without checking,
me not knowing was like, well, if I don't have a child that's alive, I go home. I guess the women stay in hospital after they give birth because there's a child there. Like, no, like also your body needs care. Yeah. And I don't know if that's insurance. Like, I mean, I'm imagine
sure it's a financial thing. I'm sure it's a financial thing. Yeah.
I just, and so no one was checking up after me. There's countries like Australia where a nurse will come to your house and check on you postpartum.
Germany too.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there was no this is how you should feel. This is what you should do. I think that part for me is the biggest problem, because it's the reason, like I said, had I not gone to hospital because I had a child there that I didn't want to leave, you think that go into septic shock at home, no one knows what's going on, and you're dead. I remember reading afterwards about I love that film Triangle of Sadness.
Yeah.
And that girl was so young. She was like 25 or something, the lead in it. And she died of septic shock. And not from, from giving birth. She was in a car accident. They didn't find the infection and like she died. Oftentimes that's what happens. And it's, the ways to look out for it is blood pressure and, stuff like that. So I woke up in hospital I know it's a very intense story, but to cut a long story short, I was on a thing called vasopressors, which is a form of life support. It's basically like shocking your system 24/7 to make sure your blood pressure can withstand and keep pumping so your heart can keep going.
Yeah.
Where your youth comes into it and saving you is they are going to, like, they flood your lungs with antibiotics, right? Like, it's so intense. And so, like, you do pick up kind of like a pneumonia, if you will, there. So so then your oxygen's really affected. So if you don't have healthy lungs beforehand and you don't have that capacity, that's also a really hard thing to fight. But for me, I was on vasopressors and it was for days. And I remember probably my worst day, I think, was my third or fourth day. Like, I was alive and cognitive, slow.
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't walk. I couldn't go to the toilet without an audience. I was like lifted to a commode. I was in a tiny dark room and very much in the ICU and very much on life support. But I was awake, and I remember on 3 or 4 days, it was just my dad and my husband in the room because they had to rotate who could visit me again because of COVID and wear masks in there and all of that. And there were a lot of rules. And so my parents and my husband like rotated 2 at a time. And I remember it was my husband and my dad in the room. And I just remember looking at them and the nurse and saying something like help me, because I felt that day was maybe my worst day. Like, I remember my temperature, even with all these drugs, it was 104. I was still on the vasopressors. I was on a lot of drugs. By then I had taken some part of like, I didn't want to take painkillers because the stories of people on Oxy in hospital.
Yeah.
So I refused those.
Oof.
But I took something else. And so, even on all of this stuff, how I felt was like, help me. I just was like, I think I wasn't doing better yet.
Yeah.
And I've looked at the report since, and it was like chance of decrease through night. Like, this was not like, saved. I got through that. I remember just feeling I was covered in ice packs. And anyway, I got through that and I moved to the general hospital after the ICU. So once they think you're stable enough, your temperature's stable, and you can get off vasopressors without your blood pressure crashing, that's when you go to the general hospital. So I went to the general surgery ward. I didn't want to go to the OB ward, and I had to really advocate for that. But I was like, I can't hear crying babies and see pink balloons come. Like, I just
no, that's a lot. Yeah,
it was so much.
It's already too much to begin with.
And I was still aware because I just lost my daughter. I was still like in the hospital, like whimpering. Like, I was like crying and in pain. And like, it was just hell. I went to the general hospital, general ward.
How long were you there for?
I was only there for a few days. I was still on oxygen. So I had to be there. I had to learn very quickly my leg, like I was walking with a walker. I still had the tubes. I still couldn't go to the toilet. I was still bleeding.
Yep.
And as soon as I could get off the oxygen, they were like, then you can go home.
Yeah.
And I got up, I'm an overachiever. I got off the oxygen.
And you wanted to go home.
I really wanted to go home. And I think that, and again, the same shit. Like, a second I was kind of okay, I went home.
Yeah.
Like we've got to clear this bed out.
And did they say, like, come back in a day or in 2 days? No. Or what was the follow-up from something like that? Like, and also, what kind of doctor do you even see for that after?
So when I was in the hospital, there was 3 teams in the ICU. I had the infectious disease team, the OBGYN labor and delivery team, and then the ICU teams. So I had 3 teams looking after me. And they came all through the day. I remember, like, I was just covered in wires. And I remember one morning, because it was a teaching hospital, like them taking like a butterfly. It's called a butterfly clip, and they like take the blood out of your fucking finger to test it because there's nothing left. And it was so painful, like just the amount of pricking and prodding. And, I know when you give birth, there's those, they wake you up in the morning, but like, I think they start at like 4 a.m. and you get used to it so quickly and you want to be like their friend because if you're like me, because again,
people pleaser 101.
Obsession. please like me. Please remember me as your most favorite patient.
Well, there's also this thought process that if someone likes you, they're gonna take care of you,
Yeah.
right? So then,
And what do you think?
you're
I'm
so
cool.
weak.
I'm cool.
Yeah, but you also want to be taken care. Like, you know
No,
what I
I
mean?
get
Like
it.
you're feeling so neglected by the whole system, and you're like, okay, maybe this one person is gonna be the one
The
that
best
takes
person,
care of me. You know?
There was the best person is when I got into the general ward. There was a woman. Her name was Nurse Nicole. And she was like a burly Jamaican woman. She was amazing. And honestly, she made me feel really, really cared for. She gave me advice like, if you want to go to the toilet and you see it's 3 a.m., push the button, because we get real busy at 4 a.m. and then we might miss you, and then you might shit or piss the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want you to have to do that. And like, I know that sounds crazy, but like she made me feel cared for. She was the first person, like I hadn't showered in a long time, and she gave me like wipes and cleaned my body down every night. And like, it just made me feel cared for. And she knew what I'd been through. I talked to her through like gulpy breaths because the oxygen still. And she told me about how she was a grandma. And one night she showed me a video of her grandson doing, what do you guys call, chest after you give birth when the baby.
Skin to skin.
Yeah. She showed me a skin to skin video and I howled. It broke my heart. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it was the first time I could howl about the pain I was in and the loss I had experienced and just everything. And I just remember she like held me, and I'm so grateful for her. She was incredible because she didn't just look after me, she saw me. And I'm really grateful for her because she was the first person that just let me howl.
At this point, you just go home.
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens then?
And I mentioned in my first thing how my therapist was like away. She was
yes.
in Africa. Okay. So it's crazy. The day she got back was the day I checked out of hospital.
And so that is like some sort of divine
and must
intervention here.
And I got out of hospital, like, just to be clear, I felt high. I felt euphoric. I didn't feel sad.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going home. And I think because I knew I survived something, it was like a survivor's high. What goes up must come down.
Well, it's also the adrenaline.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So I called her and I was like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I feel okay. And she was like, the anesthesia hasn't worn off yet. Like, call me tomorrow. I'm like, I'm so sorry I wasn't here. And I was like, I've got this,
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm great.
I'm the cool girl. Everyone wants to be best friends with me.
Yeah, God. I think we texted the next day and I said, I'm good. And then it hit me like a ton of like, I had severe PTSD. I had complex trauma. And suddenly I'm this person that never had an issue sleeping. I found myself at 3 a.m. on my computer looking up medical journals, looking up statistics of maternal morbidity, maternal mortality.
Yeah.
America has the highest rate of the developed world.
Yep,
it's crazy by far. Yeah. I looked at my odds. I found out that the odds of like a stillbirth mixed with septic shock are very high, but at the same time, an odds of what my daughter had, what I had, it was like 0.0001%. And it's like, that's not the way you want to win the lotto, you know? And I became just convinced that I was going to die and that no one would respond to my calls of help.
Yeah.
And I know that directly came from like having a septic shock and not really being believed. I know it came from how my daughter was treated and the mismanagement in her care.
Yeah.
And I know that now, but I would lie in bed like I was on something, like an upper drug, and just be convinced that like I was going to die, that my blood pressure was going to drop again and no one would believe me, that my heart would stop, that just things that I've never had health anxiety. And it just was really scary. I didn't have an OB. Yeah. I didn't have aftercare. I didn't have a primary care provider. Just because like I just never had one. Yeah. A lot of people don't have them. Yeah. By the way, you should absolutely have one. Because you need someone that knows your history. Because you go into something like this and then suddenly going to an urgent clinic, like, no, they don't give a shit. Like, and it was still COVID. I had a friend take me to the doctor and they would just look at me like, first of all, your blood pressure's fine. We're confident that today you are not dying.
Yeah.
And I would just cry because I didn't understand. I was like, I'm never going to get through this. It was paralyzing. I still couldn't walk properly. I couldn't do a block around my house, because I was still like trying to get my legs back.
Yeah.
I didn't eat because my anxiety was so high and my depression was so low. And I just quickly became a different person. And it was really scary. I was like, if I don't get better, I'm done. I want to go to like a trauma retreat, and they have those all over America, but like also they're $10,000 like for 5 days.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, I have a therapist, this and that, but like it was, I don't know if I'm yelling, but like it was really hard. And you can feel that.
And there's also no plan.
There was no plan.
It doesn't seem like every time you go back home, there's no plan.
My psychiatrist basically was like, I cannot believe this. Once again, you've left with no plan. If God knows why you have to go back to hospital, you're putting me on speaker. This is insane. And the most insane part is I had that doctor that helped me with my daughter that had given me her cell number. And for some reason, I didn't ever think like to call her or text her, even when I was in the hospital, because I was like, oh, I don't want to waste her time. Like she helped me so much. But you don't, right? Because there's this boundary too where you want to respect medical professionals, and at the same time, how things work here is just so different.
It is very different. I mean, I'm also Latin, so I don't understand personal space. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I used to not, and I've gone to therapy to learn boundaries. So I'm like trying to, but it was really hard. The other thing that was concerning me is I ended up actually bleeding. So this is crazy. This is crazy. I mean, I went home and dealt with all of that. I did end up getting a primary care provider. I really like him. Big thing. But I ended up bleeding for 13 more weeks.
Is that normal?
No, I mean, I Googled it. I ended up texting that woman finally, and she was like, let me get you someone. And within 5 minutes, I saw this guy, and he said, okay, you're bleeding because there's tissue, but we don't, after everything you've been through, we don't want to still interfere, blah, blah, blah. I went back every 2 weeks. It was still there. I was still bleeding. I remember the clots that were coming out of me were like literally the size of golf balls. So I did end up having to go back to hospital 13 weeks later. I was still bleeding and have a D&C. After all of this, in many ways, she was still inside me. There was still placenta inside me. I don't know if that's what caused the infection. Millions of things can.
Yeah.
But the fact is, like, I wasn't done with my surgery yet. And, like, that's just insane.
Who gives you the plan after that? Is that your OB, or is it, like, your head doctor as far as, like, how do you find care after that?
So what I did was I asked the woman that had helped, the head of, like, the maternal or fetal care, can I please have a list of names of people that you recommend?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to move forward.
Yeah.
And I don't trust anybody. She gave me a list of names, and slowly I sat with those people and said, I need to meet with this person and just talk to them. And I wanted to see how I felt with them and how they responded. And I did that. And to be honest, I kept four different OBs as like, those are going to be my doctors. And until I knew I wanted to go back to someone, I kind of made the call then. I also had a primary care provider. I think knowledge is power.
I agree.
So for 100%. Me, I started wearing a Whoop, which is kind of like an Aura ring.
Monitor yourself.
To monitor myself.
Well, you also feel like you kind of have to do it yourself because no one believed you before.
Yeah, so, and I was like, knowledge is power. Why wouldn't I want to know what my heart rate is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also did on Amazon buy a small blood pressure machine. Again, why not?
I mean, you also,
No, but I'm like, I wasn't doing it 20 times a day, but like, you know what? If you're up at night and you have anxiety and you think you have a blood pressure issue, take your blood pressure.
Yeah.
It's going to tell you. And then that's going to make you know, like, is this mental? Is this bodily? And like, it's an easy answer if you do that.
Yeah.
So for me, those are just like some small medical tools.
Yeah.
That helped me with my anxiety.
Is there any treatments that work for you or things that didn't work for you?
There are so many things. I at first thought I maybe wanted to see like a trauma therapist instead of my therapist that I had a relationship with. I spoke to some people, and for me, I learned I actually would be better up with my therapist, who's a psychotherapist. She's in New York. We've been Zooming for like nearly a decade, and because I met her when I lived in New York, and I was like, you know what, we have so much history that I would rather this relationship than start with someone new.
Yeah. From zero.
Yeah. So I started seeing her more often. I think for a while I saw her twice a week. Then I saw her once a week. Now it's once every 2 weeks on SSRIs, antidepressants. I was on them before, but I increased the dose after everything. And that's because, you know, when your base level drops through trauma, the way an SSRI is going to affect you and your serotonin is also going to change. So I
Mhm.
think it's important to have someone you trust.
Yeah.
I think personally it's so irresponsible that like there's these, .com companies right now that just like prescribe the
Exactly.
antidepressants because they're really hard to come off. They're really hard to increase. You need to know what you're doing, and the side effects are real. So like, I'm grateful that I had someone I trusted, but I did go up and I haven't gone back down.
Yeah.
And, I've asked to, and like, I trust that he knows me to be like, wait.
Yeah. Is there like, did you try to do any
Yes.
sort of
So,
holistic approach that
yes.
didn't work?
I also had this amazing doctor throughout my pregnancy and throughout my IVF journey. Her name is Dr. Pooja. She's an Indian doctor in New Zealand that a mutual friend had introduced me to, and she's an Ayurvedic specialist.
Okay.
This woman is like, if love was a human, she is it. She is the most beautiful soul.
What kind of therapy did she do with you?
I mean, she's Ayurvedic and holistic. A lot of it was kind of rounded.
She's in New Zealand, though, and
She's
you're
in New
here.
Zealand.
So you do it through Zoom, or
and
okay.
it works.
Okay.
Few things. She's very much of the mindset that's like that Joe Dispenza of like, what you see is what you are,
Mm-hmm.
and the visualization,
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. She does a lot of that. Like, you are good. It's okay sometimes not to be, but she definitely lives in the present and like what you exist in as a reality. She does that work, but she also knows when to like pull back on that a little bit, because I think that's important. Balance is, for me, everything. She does a lot of breath work. I think breathing is just the most important thing.
Yeah.
Heartbeat.
But it's just crazy because I feel like we just think of breathing as like something that everyone just takes for granted.
Yeah.
But we don't realize how
We don't
much
breathe
an effect it has. Yeah, we don't breathe properly, the effect it has in our brain.
Oh my God, breath is just like, if you need to calm right down, stop breathing. Count your breaths. We did a lot of breath work, but everything, different kinds.
Mm-hmm.
She also does a lot of chanting. I did that before this all happened, so I would say that like really helped me. But chanting for me, personally, I love. The reason I love chanting, it's kind of embarrassing, but like, I'm not a great singer. I love to sing.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I wanted to be a singer my whole life, but I am
like,
tone
take
deaf.
me to the karaoke bar. I will hug the
I
microphone.
will think I'm Beyonce. Yeah.
And I also rap, which is even more cringe. But like, what I loved about chanting is like, I can sing as loud as possible, and you can't really in my house tell me to shut up.
Yeah.
Because like, this is like spiritual work, right? So I think like I was made to chant. So I really liked that, and having mantras. So she did kind of a lot of work with that, and then easy movement, like simple yoga movements that are just easy on the body and relaxing the system,
Yeah.
She also was really big in natural kind of remedies. So, whether it's like sending me all the way from New Zealand, ashwagandha of a certain kind and stuff like that. That's a modality that worked for me.
Yeah.
And
so it's a combination between all these different things.
Yeah. And I'll also say though, like, I lean into being a little bit obsessive.
Mm-hmm.
So that means also with this work, I've had to pull away and say to Pooja at times, you know what? I'm getting a little obsessive with my mantra. I'm getting a little obsessive with the chanting. So I don't want to see you for a month, because I realize that I think if I don't do this, it's a bad thing. And you need to just find what works for you.
Yeah.
But all these things together, I would say, really important. And then for me, like, the number one thing on top of that, and like, is a personal thing, is I don't drink.
Yeah.
And I think that, I know that if I drank, I wouldn't have been able to recover and heal in the way I have. I still have a long way to go. I'm still always a breath away from laughing and crying. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Life on life's terms. Life is in session. But I think if I drank, I would be escaping the reality, and it would prolong the pain.
Yeah. It's also an antidepressant, so it will make it a lot. Not an antidepressant. It is an antidepressant.
Yeah.
Sorry. So it really definitely makes it a lot worse.
Yeah.
I think that I've seen that in my family history quite a bit. So I actually do the opposite whenever I'm going through a hard time.
Care is so important, and knowing what your limits are. And for me, alcohol is absolutely a depressant.
Yeah.
I cannot drink.
Yeah.
And if I had gone through what I had gone through and drank afterwards, forget about it.
Yeah. I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find shocking in a good way, you and your husband are very happily married. And I think that, I don't know the actual statistics of this, but most couples don't survive after something like this, because you start blaming each other, and obviously people are hurting in different ways.
Yeah, and men and women grieve differently.
Well, you also had the baby like inside. It's just a different. Yeah, it's different.
It's so
right?
different.
How do you think there's anything that you guys did that like really helped? Like,
I mean, it wasn't always perfect. I would say that I got married quote later in life, not that late, but like I have a lot of friends that got married in like, their 20s. I met Zach when I was 30. We got married pretty quickly, but like we both had lived whole lives, semi-whole lives before we met, and both had done a lot of work on ourselves to be in the place to meet and want to be our best selves. I think that one thing that was really hard for me is accepting that men and women, however you identify, grieve differently. And I think that there was a little book they actually gave me in hospital about that. I think it was funded. There's a company called March of Dimes that works with a lot of women that have had loss, miscarriage. It was just kind of a resource book. And just to like explain the difference between generally men and women is like, I read the book that talks about how men and women grieve differently, and Zach never picked it up, and it's still like in the kitchen somewhere, like waiting for him to look.
Yeah.
And they talk about the fact that like women, we need to talk, we need to express, we're creative, in the way we express ourselves, and we need dialogue.
Yeah, to digest things.
And to understand
That's how we process.
Yes. Yeah. And we're going to go into like, I always talk about like the Italian piazza. Like we're going to get in the piazza and like we need to have our coffee and talk.
Yeah.
And men, everyone knows that like men have dens where they become these reclusive, like whatevers, like back in the day, and they like look after themselves like bears that like need to hibernate. And like I would say that in many ways, that's kind of, there was a difference in how we process, where like I really wanted to talk to him about everything, and he was like, I cannot talk about everything all the time.
Yeah.
And it really hurt me because I'm like, why aren't you grieving the loss of our daughter enough? Why is this physically and visually and emotionally looking different to me than it is to you?
Yeah.
Don't you feel this? Like, how can you go to jiu-jitsu? I don't know, because maybe what he needs to do is like rumble or whatever they call it with a man, right? Where I'm like, I need to not eat and feel like I'm doing a sacrifice. Like, we're all so different.
Well, and it's also like, this is the only person that knows exactly what you went through. So then it's also lonely that you feel like you're going through this by yourself, right?
It sucks.
And no one else can understand unless they literally went through this.
And it started also earlier, like I said, when we found out something was wrong with our daughter in terms of how the outcome may be, and she was very ill, he was allowed to cry in bed. He was allowed to shake in bed and be sad. But I held her and I wanted to be positive. I didn't want her to feel that from my body. Yeah. So even then, I think his journey started in a way that where he could accept reality in a different way that I could till later.
Yeah.
And I think those things were different. I also think the thing that was really hard is I'm very outgoing. I talk a lot. I'm the one, there's this Larry David Kirby episode where he talks about the person that's the middle in the restaurant that can handle the conversation. I'm a middle. My husband is not a middle. Like, don't put him in the middle. Love him, put him on the left.
Yeah.
So like suddenly to have this wife that like you met that was so boisterous, suddenly becoming a shell was also really hard for him, because suddenly I'm not leaving the house anymore. And he's like, are we ever going to leave the house again? Because I was the one that made the plans. And I was like, you can leave the house, but like, no, not today. Like, this is as much as I can do. I don't want to see anyone. I would like cry in public. Like, I remember we went to like this restaurant, All Time. And we had like a meal, and this woman walked in pregnant next to me, and I just started crying. And like that for him triggered a whole lot of shit, because like his mom used to cry a lot, and like she had her issues. So now I was like the your dynamics change.
Yeah.
Are we good? Yeah, I'm really lucky. I'm obsessed with him. And like we've been able to, do work.
What kind of work are you guys doing that do you think that it has been possible? Do you guys go to couples therapy together, or like are you guys doing breath work together? Or
I mean, sometimes I try and make him do shit like that. He's not really into it. I started trying to do that early in our relationship. I was like, look into my eyes. Do you feel the no, he's like, not about that. But we are brutally honest with each other. We communicate a lot. Yeah. I have learned to say to him, hey babe, I want to talk to you, and I can see you're stressed. So at 8 p.m., do you have time to have a real conversation with me? And that means like I have to shut up until that period. I can't at midnight start the conversation about being stressed. Like I'll send the meme and the joke about people doing that, but I can't. Because then he's going to spiral and we respond differently. But I do think we are good at communicating. And I had to let him, and he had to let me accept that this was a different experience.
Yeah.
And that I would get better, and I would feel like myself. I needed the space to do that. And that he would grieve, and he needed the space to do that. That he did need to talk to someone, but because he didn't want to start therapy on day one, that was okay. And we did see a couples counselor once when we first found out everything was happening. And we talked to her and she kind of was like, you guys seem to like, I'm not saying you're perfect, but you seem to have like the package of communication here. And like, that's very important. So we had that. I had to accept there were certain things he wasn't capable of.
Yeah.
And he had to accept the same from me. I would also say sexually, think that one of the things that's hard is like, I know people postpartum, and I don't know your experience, but like they find it sometimes, you know, they don't feel particularly sexual afterwards. I would say try being postpartum with a child that didn't make it, and your husband knows that your child came, you know, unalive outside of your womb, and you know that your womb, you know, as much as you don't want to blame yourself, there's something psychological there. I mean, that's hard. Like,
and it's also hard for him because that's how he shows love. So he doesn't.
So we had to find a way also even to communicate about like what our needs are. And I'm really proud of us, but like it's been, you know, 2.5 years since it happened. And you know, my dad is not good at advice, but he always said one thing to me as a kid. And it was always like when I had like a crush on a boy, and he'd say, it's pretty funny. He'd always say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, when things weren't working out for me. And I think what I learned with my husband, and I had to learn, was I can tell you need therapy, but I can't force you to have therapy. And I also can't think that I'm a bad wife if I can't get you to go to therapy, because guess what? You're eventually going to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like life happens. And he did. And I think that's really important, because I had to say, like, we're both grieving, but we can't be each other's own grief space. We need a separate outlet.
Yeah.
To deal with shit. And also because, to be clear, the IVF journey for us is not over. And I went through that, but it was like, I still want a child that's earthside.
Yeah.
And we had to get back into that. And there's a whole lot of other things associated to that too. So that work for me, like, I know this sounds like easier said than done, and like easier said than done. And we identify, I don't know if you've heard the term DINKY, D-I-N-K-Y. It's really fair. It's like double income, no kids yet, right? Okay. So what that means is like we can have nice holidays.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's for us really important that even if it's a weekend, go somewhere, reconnect. The house can have lots of toxic energy. I'm sure it's the same with kids and all of that. So like for us, that was an important thing. And just
put each other first too.
My relationship is not perfect. I think anyone that thinks they have a perfect relationship isn't living in a truth. I don't aspire to have a perfect relationship, because that would mean that I'm probably withholding something.
Yeah.
And we're honest. We communicate. We are very different people, and we've grown together. And I'm just really proud of us, because I know that like
it is very impressive. And like, you know, I think it's just a sign of a really strong family too. I mean, the one thing we know for sure is like, life is gonna throw you curveballs with kids, without kids, depending on like, you know what I mean. So at least you have that already.
I think with the right partner, whatever that looks like I think radical acceptance is super important. Yeah, I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I mean, my husband, he dresses like Adam Sandler, and I know that sounds stupid, and I'm always like, you're not rich or famous enough to be dressing this way. But like, what am I going to do? Wear the basketball shorts? You know, like, is that what we're going to like fight about? No.
Yeah, in the big scheme of things.
No. And like, he allows me to send new Labubos to my house every day. And like, what are you going to do?
When it comes to these very hard life situations, a lot of people don't know how to react, because unless you have gone through something of that extent, you also don't want to be like, everything is going to be fine, because I don't think anyone
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? I don't think anyone wants to hear that either. What would be the best way to be there for a friend?
I would say one thing, I mentioned my friend Caitlin. One thing she did that was really helpful is she went into my Instagram and she blocked every ad that had anything to do with the baby, because I need that algorithm to change. I think everyone is different in how they want a friend to be there. But since I believe in communication, I would say asking, is there anything I can do, but hi, I want to be there for you. Can I check in every day, or is that too much? How can I best show up for you?
Yeah.
Because we are different. And I was surprised, because even in my life, when it happened, there were certain people I didn't communicate with and I ignored, and there were certain people that I let right in. And I would think it's just the degree of empathy that, like, if we are really close and you know everything I've been through, you're probably already really close to me and you're in my life, and I'm grateful. If you've been through something similar, I'm probably more open to hearing from you, because it's really hard when people do this thing where they compare. And I think I've said earlier, comparison is the thief of joy. But like, do not compare my experience to yours. We have different experiences, and that's okay. But the second you try and like double down and like our loss is the same, like you don't need to do that. I think friendship is such an interesting thing, and maybe like I don't know your experience because you don't come from LA either.
Yeah.
But like the second my daughter got sick, or the second I found out she was sick, I started a WhatsApp that had 6 people on it. 2 of them were Australians that live in America, and the other 4 live in Australia. And they were my girlfriends from when I was a child. And it was so weird to me that after all this time, the people that made me feel safest, that I could just say anything and they could just respond, and that I wanted to keep them up to date, were these friends I've had since I was 10. And like, I mean, it's really beautiful. And it doesn't mean I've gone home to hang out with them, but it's just the people sometimes, like I have beautiful friendships here, but I think there's that core you sometimes where you're like, that's my safe place. And I'm
it's
lucky
also
I have
less to
it.
explain, right? I feel like culturally, I mean, I don't necessarily have that necessarily with high school friends, but I have that with friends that are Latin.
Yeah.
Because culturally, I don't have to explain as much as I would have to explain to an American person,
we're just doing
right?
it differently.
It's just easier.
Yeah.
It just feels more home.
I did have, you know, when I had septic shock, I had this dear friend, Sarah, that like was, I think, the first person in the hospital that like her mother had been sick and she really knew how to be there. And she gave me like, I couldn't have it at the time, but she brought like healing tea and like just checked in, you know? And I'll say Sarah, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying this, but like Sarah is a girl that I love. And a year later when she told me she was pregnant, and to me it felt like an easy journey for her to get pregnant, we really kind of weren't as close anymore because I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And I love her and we've talked about it.
Yeah. I also feel like there's all these ideas about people assuming things and judging things. You can only show up to where you are at that point.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't make you a bad person.
No.
You've gone through so much. Like, it will be normal for you not to be. I'm happy for you, and I can be happy from you from a distance. I don't have to be happy for you next to you, because that's not how I can mentally.
I also think it's really important to say I love you and I love me more.
Yeah.
Like you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
And I think that with friends, like really grateful for the ones that like, if they're close enough, I think they kind of know how to show up. And the truth is like, I know there's some people that just pull away, as in like, what happened to me, maybe my response could have been just to pull away. And that's because unfortunately you're not who I wanted to talk to. And like, it's not personal. It's how I responded.
Yeah.
And I think that like we have different friends that fill different kind of parts of our journey in life, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Like seasons, days, like years, forever, like whatever it is, it's okay that certain people can kind of show up in different ways for you.
I think it's kind of like what you say, it's really not personal. Even with a relationship, when you're trying to have everything fulfilled by one person, it's just going to be doomed, right? So like you knew your husband had limitations. So then you also started to like, you have a holistic person, you have like your like, you know, so you build a team of like whatever it is that you need. Not one person can
save you.
Like, not like I wish, but like not a friend, not your mom, not your husband. You know what I mean? And also being aware of that
certain people can serve different things, right? My parents can show up in a way that I know they love me. I don't think that they have the wherewithal to be my emotional support, and that's why I'm like very much individuated. But also at the same time, like my husband doesn't have the full capacity to emotionally support me, but like that's not always what I need from him.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's a journey. But I also think that there's friends I met that have been through really intense things, and they're rock stars, and I'm so grateful for them because they could show me resources. Like,
what do you wish you would have known?
You know, this is like extremely political, but I think what is so hard about living here is that everything that has happened to me is a product of the fact that we live in a very capitalist society. And from the get-go, I think every decision presented to me is based in this idea that you can like buy the experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I would say from the very beginning, again, I think IVF is great, but I think it was sold to me as this just really
a solution
thing. It's this easy thing that like you can throw money at to get what you need. And again, I have no problem with that. I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
But I think that how quickly it was sold and how quickly it was packaged to me, I think that's a really hard pill to swallow because it's not true. And I think that it's hard that we live in a society that doesn't share that there's both sides, a flip a coin. It goes either way. And we're only shown the positive. So I think that like what I wish I had known is how harsh that reality is, so I could just take it into account. Maybe I would have tried naturally a bit longer, it wouldn't have worked. Maybe I would have done a transfer after my first instead of like thinking I needed to like make more. Like, I don't know, but I just think that our bodies as females are really exploited by the system. And I don't think there's enough research there with what these drugs are doing to us long term, the psychological effects, the physical effects, the emotional effects, the sexual effects, the relationship effects. Like, I mean, it goes on.
Yeah.
When you're doing IVF, you can't have hot baths, you can't exercise vigorously, you get a little obsessive, you want it to work, and you feel all the pressure. And like, honestly, like, nature's going to do what it does. That's the hardest pill to swallow. Is like, at the end of the day, there's so much shit we don't know. And I wish that like there was part of me that knew that in a clearer way. I don't believe in regrets.
Yeah.
I can't. It's just me. But like, I do think that if I could help anyone, it would be like, advocate for yourself. If a doctor is rushing you, maybe they're not your doctor. If a doctor makes you uncomfortable, they're not the be all and end all. If a doctor has a celebrity profile, it doesn't mean that they're amazing.
Yeah.
Right? It means they have enough time to have a celebrity profile. If someone's putting a doctor on a podcast and making them an influencer, like, maybe they're an influencer more than they're a doctor. Like, I think that like there's a lot of those things that like you should gut check. Talk to patients that maybe didn't get it for free.
Go to Yelp, and apparently you can text people and like get to learn about their experience too, which I didn't even know.
Who knew? So
who knew?
And I think read reviews, and also sometimes reviews are scrubbed, but like, have a consultation. If someone's like pressuring you into shit after a consultation, like, I don't know. Like, I know I'm the kind of person, like, I've never seen a plastic surgeon, but I still know after all of this, I'm dumb enough that if I see the right surgeon, like the one that just did Chris, and he said something to me, even if he made me uncomfortable and all this shit, I'd probably like, go under, but like, maybe he's not the right person for me. Yeah. Like, maybe he's going to give Chris better attention, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think it's important what you said, because of women, we just want to be agreeable that finding a doctor and finding an OBGYN and finding a clinic to do IVF, it's like dating. And it's okay to go to many before you figure out who your right team is.
Yes. And it's okay to be open about it. Like, when I went and interviewed those OBs and I was in a very vulnerable place, like I said, this happened to me and now I want to meet people and I want to establish a relationship. I want you to know who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to pay an extra concierge fee for that. Because like, this should exist.
Are insane to me, but
no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, it's just so wild. I want to know that, like, look, maybe you're not going to give me your cell phone, but if I write you in a portal, are you going to respond?
Yeah.
Do you do the delivery? Whatever that question is, it's okay to like ask it. And I think that like, the IVF doctor I have now, like, I have his cell phone number. Yeah, I'm not afraid to use it. He knows it. Like, I don't care, because if I'm not getting the answer from the nurse because she's got too many patients, like, I need to ask you. And I think that is fair, and it's okay to expect whatever the expectation you have.
Yeah. There's no right and wrong about that. No. And I feel like that's a great lesson in life with everything, because I feel like there's a lot of times that people are putting out their own, it's okay, you're asking for too much. You're asking for whatever it is that you need, and whatever you need is your valid human experience, and you should be able to get that. Especially when you're paying the U.S. prices that we pay for things.
We live in a country in America where we have the highest mortality rate in a developed country for women.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck how much space you take up. Take it up, because it is life and death.
Yeah.
And I just, in the position I'm in, because I've shared, I have had people reach out to me with the most horrific stories. Horrific.
Yeah.
Whether they've lost their children during birth because of negligence, whether they've lost limbs, whether it's a husband that lost his wife. I mean, this is real stuff. Yeah. It's life and death, and it's okay to ask for what you want. And if the person's not giving you it, it's okay to not continue seeing them. I think that we, I'm not saying be check
Be a
yourself.
bitch. I'm saying be a bitch.
No, I'm just saying, you can check yourself. Like, am I being insane? Maybe that's okay for me to be. Maybe I need to go see my therapist a little more too, because I'm like obsessive and like, whatever, you do you.
I know you're still trying. I'm very excited.
Quit before the miracle happened. And if you wanted to, by the way, that's okay. I want to say that
because maybe the miracle is doing things in a different way, right?
Well, I would say that like I do have some friends that started journeys, and they've said to me, you know what? I looked at my husband, we reevaluated shit, and like we're good.
Yeah, maybe the miracle is like that relationship.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
and like we all want different things. So I would also say just be real about what you want. Like.
And know your limits too, like how far you can go.
I've always said what are my limits, and like unfortunately I don't have them with this. So still here.
I do think that you're one of the very few people that talks about this. They're in the middle and that gray area, as opposed to trying to come up with a success story, which is what most people do. And I think that's why I also wanted to talk to you, because I think there's a lot of people that are very much that gray area right now. Thank you so much for being so open and so raw.
The irony is like I'm in the gray area. I have this joke that one day I'll make a book called K for Katrina in the Gray, because I think like my life lesson is learning to live in the gray. I used to be so much more impulsive, but like we don't know what we don't know. That's okay. And even though we say it's this ugly gray area, I mean today it's beautiful. And like that's okay. Like I'm just in what I'm in, and more will be revealed. And it's a life lesson.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for reaching
out. Thank you so much for being so open. We are in the perfect present moment, which is so hard to stay in. Thank you.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. Thank you everyone for listening.